The galaxy had never seen such darkness. The Dominion had swept across 17 star systems in less than 3 standard cycles. Their massive black warships moved through space like a plague of metal and fire. Every planet they touched turned to ash. Every civilization they encountered became nothing more than memory and dust. Admiral Al of the Galactic Alliance stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Eternal Light. His 4 eyes watched the tactical display with growing despair. Red icons representing enemy vessels outnumbered their blue markers by 20 to 1. The Alliance had gathered every ship from every member species. 37 races had sent their finest vessels, yet it was not enough. It would never be enough. They were ancient. They had been conquering worlds when most Alliance species still lived in caves. Their technology was beyond understanding. Their weapons cut through the strongest shields like water through sand. Their soldiers felt no fear and knew no mercy. "Admiral," said his first officer, a tall named, "the enemy fleet is entering the nebula. They will reach the refugee convoys in 6 hours." Al closed his eyes. Behind the battle lines, 47 billion civilians waited in transport ships. Mothers held their children. Elders prayed to forgotten gods. Young ones who had never known war trembled in the darkness of cargo holds. They had fled their burning worlds with nothing but hope, and now that hope was dying. "How many ships do we have remaining?" Al asked, though he already knew the answer would bring no comfort. 412 combat-capable vessels, Admiral. They have over 8,000. A heavy silence filled the command deck. Officers from a dozen different species exchanged looks of quiet acceptance. They had known this moment would come. They had hoped it would not come so soon. "We will fight," Al declared, his voice steady despite the fear in his hearts. "We will buy the civilians as much time as possible. Perhaps some of them will escape to the outer rim. Perhaps somewhere, somehow, our people will survive." The Admiral was about to give the order to advance when his communications officer suddenly made a sound of confusion. The young female stared at her console with all 6 of her tentacles frozen in place. "Admiral, I am receiving a signal. It is coming from beyond the nebula, from the dead zone." Al felt his blood chill. The dead zone was a region of space that no ship had entered for over 1,000 years. Long ago, a species had claimed those stars as their territory. They had asked to be left alone. They had made it very clear what would happen to anyone who ignored their request. The Galactic Council had agreed, and the dead zone had remained silent ever since. "What kind of signal?" Al demanded. "It is a voice transmission, Admiral, in the common tongue." "Play it." Static filled the bridge, followed by a sound that made every officer freeze. It was a voice, a human voice, deep, calm, and filled with something that none of them had heard in a long time. It was filled with confidence. "This is High Admiral Sarah of the United Earth Armada. We have monitored your distress calls. We have watched the advance. We have debated long enough. The humans of Earth are coming. Hold your positions. Do not lose hope. We are bringing the thunder." The message ended. Silence returned to the bridge. Turned to the Admiral with confusion in his compound eyes. "Humans. I have never heard of this species." Al searched his memory. Humans. The name stirred something ancient in his thoughts. His grandfather had told him stories as a child. Stories about a species that had emerged from a tiny blue world on the edge of the galaxy. They had been primitive when first contact was made, violent, tribal. The Galactic Council had deemed them too dangerous to join the Alliance. They had been left alone, quarantined in their small corner of space. That had been over 800 years ago. "They were supposed to be primitives," Al whispered. "They were supposed to stay on their world forever." Before anyone could respond, the sensors began screaming. The navigation officer nearly fell from his chair as he read the data streaming across his screen. "Admiral, massive energy signatures emerging from hyperspace, directly behind the fleet." The tactical display flickered, and then updated. What appeared on the screen would haunt Al's dreams for the rest of his long life. Ships, thousands upon thousands of ships. They poured out of hyperspace like a river of steel and fire. They were not elegant like Alliance vessels. They were not sleek like warships. They were brutal, angular, covered in weapons that glowed with barely contained power. Each ship bristled with gun batteries and missile pods. Each hull bore the same symbol, a blue and green circle, a planet, Earth. The human fleet did not slow down. It did not form into defensive formations. It did not wait for orders or coordination. It simply attacked. The first wave of human missiles struck the rear of the formation like a hammer striking glass. Shields that had resisted every alliance weapon flickered and failed under the assault. Warships that had seemed invincible began to burn. Explosions lit up the darkness of space like new stars being born. On the command deck of the Eternal Light, officers watched in stunned silence as the impossible unfolded before their eyes. How is this possible, breathed? They have the most advanced shields in the galaxy. Al had no answer. He could only watch as the human armada carved through the enemy fleet with terrifying efficiency. Human vessels moved in perfect coordination, their attacks timed to overwhelm defensive systems. When one ship was damaged, another would take its place without hesitation. They fought as if they had been preparing for this moment for centuries. Perhaps they had. The fleet, for the first time in recorded history, began to fall back. Their commanders had not expected resistance. They had certainly not expected this. Ships that had conquered entire civilizations now found themselves outmatched and outnumbered. The hunters had become the hunted. High Admiral Sarah watched the battle from the bridge of her flagship, the Indomitable Spirit. Her face was calm, her eyes focused. Behind her stood officers whose ancestors had dreamed of this day for 800 years. When the galaxy had rejected humanity, they had not given up. They had not surrendered to despair. Instead, they had looked up at the stars that had been forbidden to them and made a promise. One day, they would return. One day, they would show the galaxy what humanity could become. For 8 centuries, they had worked in secret. They had built. They had invented. They had created technologies that the Alliance had never imagined. They had studied every species, every conflict, every weakness in galactic civilization. They had prepared for a war that they knew would eventually come. And now that war was here. "Admiral," said her tactical officer, "the command ship is attempting to retreat." "Do not let it escape," Sarah ordered. "All ship groups converge on the command vessel. End this." 40 human battleships moved to surround the massive command ship, their weapons charged with a sound that could be felt even through the vacuum of space. The Supreme Commander, a being who had overseen the destruction of countless worlds, found himself facing something he had never experienced before. Fear. The human weapons fired in unison. The command ship, a vessel that had existed for over 10,000 years, ceased to exist in an instant. Its destruction sent a shockwave through the enemy fleet. Ships began to surrender. Others tried to flee, only to be caught by the relentless human pursuit. In less than 2 hours, the battle was over. Admiral Al requested communication with the human fleet. His hands trembled as he waited for a response. When the screen flickered to life, he found himself looking at a human female. She appeared so fragile compared to most galactic species. 2 eyes, soft skin, no natural armor or weapons, yet there was something in her gaze that made Al's instincts scream at him to submit. "High Admiral," Al began, his voice thick with emotion. "I do not have words to express our gratitude. You have saved billions of lives today. You have done what we thought impossible." Sarah's expression softened slightly. "We have been watching for a long time, Admiral. We knew they would eventually threaten the entire galaxy. We could not allow that to happen." "But why? The Alliance rejected your people. We left you alone to develop without guidance or help. We called you primitives and savages." The human admiral smiled, and in that smile, Al saw something extraordinary. He saw forgiveness. "We were primitive once," Sarah admitted. "We were violent and tribal and all the things the galaxy feared, but we learned. We grew. We became something new. And one thing we learned above all else is that no species should face extinction alone, not even those who once turned their backs on us." Al felt shame wash over him. His people had been part of the council that had quarantined humanity. They had voted to keep them isolated. And yet, when the darkness came, these humans had set aside ancient grievances to save strangers. "What do you want in return?" Al asked. "Name your price. Anything we have is yours." "We want only one thing, Admiral. We want to join you, not as conquerors or rulers, but as partners. The galaxy is vast and dangerous. Though we're only the beginning. Other threats will emerge. We believe that together, humans and the Alliance can face any challenge." Al nodded slowly. "I will speak to the Council, but I believe I can promise you now that your request will be granted. You have earned your place among the stars." In the weeks that followed, the story of the Battle of Nebula spread across the galaxy. Every species learned the name of humanity. They learned of the armada that had emerged from the dead zone like avenging angels. They learned that humans were not primitive savages to be feared and isolated. They were warriors who fought for those who could not fight for themselves. The Galactic Alliance was reformed with humanity as a founding member. Human technologies were shared freely. Human ships patrolled the borders of civilized space. And whenever danger threatened, whenever hope began to fade, the people of the galaxy knew that they were not alone. They had seen what humans could do when all seemed lost. They had witnessed the thunder that High Admiral had promised, and they knew that as long as humanity stood with them, the darkness would never win. On Earth, children who had grown up hearing stories of rejection now looked up at the stars with pride. Their ancestors had been cast out. They had been called dangerous and unworthy, but they had proven that the measure of a species is not found in the circumstances of their birth. It is found in the choices they make when others need them most. Humanity had chosen to save a galaxy that had once abandoned them. And in doing so, they had finally found their place among the stars.